My name is Roosevelt, and I'm not an SRE engineer by trade. However, by opportunity, I've become one. So I'm not very experienced, but however, we're all techies at the end of the day. But my talk today is reliability on the edge. In my early years, I live in England, just across the pond. However, I started a startup and I moved to Africa about 18 months ago. And what we basically do at the startup is provide low cost acceptance for micro businesses. And the reason why we do what we do is that Africa's GDP in total is about $3 trillion. However, 2.6 trillion of that is in the hands of micro businesses, right? So these are the businesses that like the mom and pop shop, the hawkers on the street. If you see a small person selling on the road in Africa, that person is part of the GDP, and that person is part of the 86% of it. Now, here's a problem with that. Most of them did not start business because they love business. They started business as a means of survival. So that means 80% of the GDP is in the hands of people who do not have the knowledge or the tools to grow. What does that mean for the GDP? It's not going to grow. It's just going to, if it goes up, it's in the hands of the 10, 20% of the businesses who are actually doing something big. So we came in to say, okay, we're going to provide education and tools to help you grow. But what we quickly found out was we are working in, I'm sorry, I'm not used to presenting with slides. So you're going to have to bear with me. So what it means is we're working in pretty remote locations that would sometimes barely have electricity or fast internet. It is slow speed if it exists at all. But all of our products are internet based and reliability becomes a real issue. And I noticed that a lot of the tools that you guys build do not work for those scenarios. And I came here today, I said, okay, let me speak up on this. Maybe to speak to maybe someone here. I can see Corologics right behind building tools for SRE. How about we put into consideration markets like that? Because that makes the majority of the market in the world today. It's not just Africa. It's in South America, it's in Southeast Asia, it's in Pakistan, it's in India. But we never really built for that. And is like that across board. OpenAI isn't considering rural businesses or rural development. People like us, we're building impact tools. But those tools are the tools we're using to build what we build hasn't been thought about for where we are building it for. And that's so now, for example, in the places where we do our work, reliability is a lifeline. Here's the thing. For most businesses out here in England and Amsterdam, it's a luxury where the fact that it's fast, it's a luxury and we're fine with it because every other thing supports it. However, over in those trenches, it's a lifeline. And what does that mean? A business owner in these markets is more concerned about uptime than fraud. Think about that. A business owner in this market is more concerned about uptime than fraud. So that means if a payment is supposed to be made right now, they want to get access to that payment right now. If they don't get it, they're just going to revert back to cash. And that's the first problem. The second thing is there's a global misconception that all is fine and dandy globally when we're building tools. It's not, right? There is loss of power, loss of connection, sometimes loss of access. You could work with teams that do not speak the same language as you. For example, we have people in Benin Republic right next to Nigeria who speak French, and we speak English. And then there's the guy in Guinea-Bissau who speaks Portuguese, or the guy in Kenya who speaks Swahili. How do you support reliability across board when you can't even speak to each other, or when the tools are built in a single language? And also some tools limit you to like using Slack. However, in some environments, they're used to phone calls. You can't text someone and they get it immediately. It's not because they don't get it immediately, but that's not their usual tool of communication. So that's what some of the things we have to figure out. Now, a lot of the tools that are available for monitoring are also very heavyweight. I'm so sorry. There's so many slides here that I'm not sliding through. I'm so sorry. There are so many things here that I'm not that needs to be talked about. So a lot of the tools are heavy. We have to figure out ways to use tools like NetData or Prometheus, which are already lightweight, to make them lighter. Where, for example, we could do an analysis offline and just maybe push the data once you're online. The reason for that is we don't have the luxury of all the bandwidths to move things real time, heavyweight. And let's say I don't know the most remote place in Amsterdam, but I can tell you a remote place somewhere sorry, bear with me, somewhere in Chad, for example, where the closest place to get electricity is like an hour drive away. So don't get me wrong, there are places that are buckling, some places like Lagos and Abuja in Nigeria that have everything you can think of. The internet is good, connection is good. However, those places make up 10, 20% of where the people actually live, the people where we're serving. So if you're thinking about those companies, let's say the Natas or the Microsofts or those ones, they're well off. However, people like us who build for the really micro business, the guys who process maybe $20 a day in business, those guys are not in big cities like this. They're in the real remote places. Do you understand? And access to those places physically and data wise is tough, right? However, they need the services. That's what I came here to speak about today, right? For example, there's an average of 12 power outages in these markets where we deal in a month. And that's about 200 plus hours of time that it takes away from businesses. So now in those times, so many things can happen. For example, there was an outage last year in March for 12 hours. We couldn't connect to any of our clouds. However, transactions needed to go on. How did we go about that? We had to resolve back to analog processing, where our systems had to start sending USSDs automatically to complete transactions for customers. So that's like offline. So we're using mobile network because that was the only thing that was available. There was no internet. Do you understand? So now the tools that are available out there do not support this, but thank God for like open source tools where you are able to like make some tweaks to fit them to your already existing systems. And also my amazing CTO, I'm technical, but I'm not that technical, right? So these are the things I've come here to speak about. Permit me to just leave the slides alone at this point because there is so much in here that I can't really just keep. So for example, these are some of the key challenges. Power stability I spoke about, the internet and high latency. Cloud reliance is unreliable. That's the truth because everything is done by links I've got this whole map somewhere. I don't think it's somewhere here. So some principles that we've adopted is trying to make reliability local. So for example, now we've made it more human-based, where we have agents in these places who are resided there, and we've had to start training them to start doing reliability locally, and then using AIs, obviously. But this is expensive for us, right? Because it's just us and it's just a singular context. And this is us having to do extra work outside of our primary work. So I think what I've come here to do today is speak with engineers and geniuses such as yourself to maybe put this into considerations when building tools, right? Because the majority of the world's problems are not in the USA, are not in Washington or in Paris, right? The majority of the world's problems are in places that will never make it to the news. And I think that's what we should start thinking of. Under here, there's something someone spoke about earlier, blameless cultures, right? We had to learn that the hard way because we realized that, okay, the problem is not the people. The problem is the context on which we're in. And that's something we're unaware of coming to the markets. We're just 2 years old in that market now. And in 18 months, I've learned more about site reliability than my own business because that reliability is more important than anything in the market where we trade in. So I'm going to just quickly just sift through. I think I've I've talked about some things here already. Sorry. So yes, I wrote this down because we noticed something else, that the existing tools out there sometimes carry too much data that we don't need. So for example, we use net data mostly for our work and Prometheus, but this one is more, the Prometheus one is more flexible for us to tweak to our use cases. And we just reduce it to the barest minimum. What we want to see is what was the error, the actual error. Someone slide earlier said logs are everything or something like that. But that's the case. What is the actual problem? Are we able to tweak your tools to show what is needed rather than all of the gibberish? Something that a 5-year-old can see and understand. I think that's what we're looking for as a company, because now I'm speaking from a product user perspective, not an engineer. We focus on the golden signals, right? And most products lack offline use cases. Most tools lack offline use cases because for most of what we do now is offline. So we just update at the end of the day. However, we now need to build on site. What does that mean? For example, we have small mobile terminals that businesses own. And those terminals now have to run all of this software, all of these processes in the background, and then update us all at once. But the tools out there today, most of them do not support that because the tools out there are for professionals. Meanwhile, there are use cases for rural use, for on the edge use, for people in war zones. For example, I was reading something today that a country like South Sudan, whose GDP is, let me not even go there. However, it's not like they don't do business there. They still do business. It's just a war zone. Now, in places like that, how do you support a place that is trying to build? Places like Liberia, who have been through times of war, so much war, and they're trying to build now. There is nothing that's built for that context in mind. Those people, they don't trust anybody. They don't even trust themselves anymore, right? And now, businesses like ours would suffer because we now have to go an extra mile to be able to bring the right product and bring the right support for that product to make sure that product never fails, because that is the bare minimum. Because if it fails once, you've lost business. So imagine that in like the global south, the next billion, that, like as they say. And I think that's what I would want us to really understand with my talk today. Sorry, just trying to just sift through my slides. Yeah, so we've gone through the pain of training local responders, right? Where site reliability is no longer a DevOps or professional only, but for people in the use cases, agents who support businesses in the local areas. So we want redundant communications to come back, texting, because that's one of the things we do today, where a system analysis could be done offline, and then the results are texted, literally, not even via the internet or anything, because sometimes that might also not go through, and the results might not come back in time. So we're able to text the files via text, and then we're able to solve those problems. So these are some of the things that we're trying to bring to I think I've spoken about most of these things already. Yes, let me just jump to the end of it, because I think I already skimmed through a lot of it already. So the key takeaways, I think context matters with site reliability, and it matters so much for 80% of the world, because that is who the real people are who actually run this world, not Trump, not the NATO, or not China. It is the 80% that nobody talks about. And I think site reliability matters for them as well, because we're going into a world full of tools, but tools built for 10, 20%. How about the 80 who actually are the downloads? Like, for example, as a business, we're quick to talk about vanity metrics. Oh, we have 1 million downloads. We have 10 million, 100 million. However, those 100 million people, they're actually in places you wouldn't believe. They're not the majority of the world. So I think building for them in mind is very important. Lightweight tooling is very important for where we're going. As advanced as we are as a people, we're actually not that advanced when you get to the brass tacks of it. When you get down to it, we're still there's internet access isn't global yet. Internet access is just global in big cities like Amsterdam and Paris. However, I'm very sure there are places where you'd go in the same country and it's not quite as we think it is. But in those same places, our services are required. So what do? We can't just leave them out of it because they make up majority of the population. The distributed ownership, right? We're building for failure because most of the tools out there do not actually build for failure these days. Most of the tools out there just build for reporting. But however, failure is actually more likely than we think in those real places, in those down bad areas, in those uncertain environments. And then reliability is a cultural and a technical investment. So for us to actually take the time and look at what we do every day and then try and solve for real people rather than for what's already available out there. Thank you very much.